The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of destiny and choice. But what happens when the Chosen One seizes the threads of fate itself and weaves a new pattern, one where he rules, not as a Sith Lord's apprentice, but as an emperor crowned by his own hand? In the smoking ruins of the Jedi Temple, as clone troopers fell under the blades of their former generals, Anakin Skywalker made a choice that shattered prophecy. He did not kneel before Palpatine. He struck him down. The night Coruscant burned with the screams of Order 66. Another fire blazed in the Senate chambers, blue lightning crackling against crimson plasma as master and apprentice clashed for the final time. Palpatine had promised Anakin the power to save Padme. What the Sith Lord hadn't anticipated was that Anakin would take that power by force, ripping it from Palpatine's dying grasp. When the Emperor's corpse tumbled from the shattered window into the abyss of Coruscant's underworld, Anakin Skywalker stood alone at the apex of galactic power, his yellow eyes already fading back to blue. He told himself it was necessary. The Republic had failed. The Jedi had failed. Only he, the Chosen One, could bring the order and peace the galaxy desperately needed. And unlike Palpatine, he would not rule through fear and hatred. He had Padme. He had their unborn children. They would be his anchor to the light, the living proof that power and love could coexist. 20 years have passed since that fateful night. The Skywalker Empire spans the known galaxy, its rule enforced not by faceless stormtroopers alone, but by two of the most powerful Force wielders ever born. Luke and Leia Skywalker, children of the Chosen One, trained from infancy in the ways of the Force by their father. They are not Jedi. Those ancient traditions died with the Temple. They are not Sith. Anakin swore he would never touch that corrupting philosophy. They are something new, something the galaxy has never seen. Luke Skywalker, at 23, commands the Imperial Starfleet's Second Fleet with a precision that makes admirals twice his age defer to his tactical brilliance. His connection to the Force allows him to sense enemy movements before they occur, to coordinate battles across entire star systems with nothing more than meditation and instinct. He wears black robes reminiscent of the old Jedi, but his lightsaber burns with unstable crimson, a crystal. He bled himself during his trials, proving to his father that he could touch darkness without being consumed. His father called it a test of will. Luke calls it a reminder. Leia Skywalker, Luke's twin by mere minutes, but his superior in political cunning, serves as the voice of the Emperor, the one who translates Anakin's will into policy, who negotiates with planetary governors and crushes dissent with words as sharp as any blade. Where Luke inherited their father's raw power and combat instinct, Leia inherited their mother's diplomatic genius and an even deeper connection to the living Force. She can sense lies like bitter poison on her tongue, can bend the weak-minded with barely a whisper. Her lightsaber remains a brilliant blue, a deliberate choice that unsettles Imperial officers who remember the Jedi Order. She insists it reminds the galaxy that the Skywalker Empire is not built on the dark side. Their father disagrees, but he's learned to choose his battles with his daughter. Emperor Anakin Skywalker rules from the rebuilt Jedi Temple, now the Imperial Palace, a monument to what was lost and what has been forged anew. The council chambers where he once knelt before Masters Yoda and Windu now serve as his throne room. The curved walls lined with holocrons salvaged from both Jedi and Sith archives. Knowledge, Anakin believes, should never be forbidden. It is the wielder, not the weapon, that determines righteousness. He teaches his children both philosophies, trusts them to find balance where he once failed. Padme Amidala Skywalker, the Empress, remains the Emperor's greatest advisor and fiercest critic. She survived childbirth, survived the horror of watching her husband kill Palpatine and claim the throne, survived 20 years of watching Anakin walk the razor's edge between justice and tyranny. She loves him still. That has never wavered, but she sees what he refuses to acknowledge. The empire he built to protect the innocent has become another machine of oppression, gentler than Palpatine's vision, perhaps, more just in its application of law, but still an empire, still built on the threat of overwhelming force. She sees it in her children too. The way Luke's hand drifts to his lightsaber when questioned. The way Leia's voice carries the subtle push of Force persuasion even in casual conversation. They are good people. She raised them to be compassionate, to value life, but they are also weapons their father forged to maintain his rule. Tonight, in the Imperial Palace's private chambers, the Skywalker family gathers for what has become a rare occasion, dinner together, away from the endless demands of governing a galaxy. Padme watches her husband across the table, notes the new lines around his eyes, the way his mechanical hand twitches when he thinks no one is looking. The Force sustains him, keeps him vital and strong. But even the Chosen One cannot hold back time forever. The Outer Rim territories are becoming problematic, Leia says, breaking the comfortable silence. She's reviewing a datapad even as she eats, a habit Padme has tried and failed to break. Governor Tarkin reports increased rebel activity near Tatooine. They're hitting supply convoys, recruiting from the moisture farmer communities. Luke frowns. Tatooine? That backwater? What could the rebellion possibly want there? Symbolism, Anakin says quietly. His blue eyes, still blue after all these years. Though sometimes Padme glimpses yellow in their depths, fix on his son. I was born a slave on Tatooine. If the rebellion can radicalize my homeworld, they send a message. Even the Emperor's origins reject him. Then let me take a battalion. Luke offers immediately. I'll crush the cell personally, make an example. No. Padme's voice cuts through the tension like a vibroblade. Every time you make an example, you create 10 new rebels. This is the mistake your father made with the Jedi Purge. Fear breeds resistance. Anakin's jaw tightens, but he doesn't argue. This is an old wound between them. Mother's right, Leia says, though her tactical mind is clearly already working through alternatives. We need intelligence, not brute force. Let me go to Tatooine. I can infiltrate the rebel cell, identify the leadership, dismantle them from within. Absolutely not, Anakin and Padme say simultaneously. And despite the tension, Luke smirks at his parents' unified front. The moment shatters as alarms shriek through the palace. Anakin is on his feet instantly, his lightsaber flying to his hand from across the room. Luke and Leia mirror him, a perfect trinity of combat readiness that makes Padme's heart ache. This is what they've become, always ready for war. Report, Anakin commands. And a hologram shimmers to life, Grand Moff. Tarkin's angular features twisted with barely concealed anger. My Lord Emperor, we have a situation. A Jedi has been spotted on Coruscant. Not just any Jedi. Tarkin pauses, and Padme sees something she's rarely witnessed in the ruthless officer. Uncertainty. Obi-Wan Kenobi has returned. The room goes utterly still. Anakin's face becomes an unreadable mask, but Padme sees his hand trembling around his lightsaber hilt. 20 years. 20 years since Obi-Wan went into hiding after the Purge. Since he refused Anakin's offer to join the New Order. Since he called his former apprentice lost to darkness despite all evidence to the contrary. Where? Anakin's voice is barely a whisper. The old Jedi Temple Memorial in the lower levels. He's not hiding, my lord. He's waiting. For you. Luke and Leia exchange glances, a silent conversation passing between the twins. They've heard stories of Obi-Wan Kenobi, the great Jedi Master, their father's teacher and friend. But they've never met him. Anakin made sure of that. I'll go alone, Anakin says. No. Leia steps forward, her blue blade igniting. We go together. We're your heirs, father. If Kenobi is here to challenge the Empire, he challenges all of us. Luke nods, his red blade casting bloody shadows across the chamber. The Skywalker Empire stands united. Padme sees it then, the choice crystallizing in her husband's eyes. This is the moment she's dreaded for 2 decades. Obi-Wan's return forces the question Anakin has avoided. Is he the hero who saved the galaxy from Palpatine's corruption, or the tyrant who merely replaced one emperor with another? If you want to see how the Skywalker dynasty faces its greatest test, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the Star Wars galaxy in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Skywalker family leaves the palace together, 3 lightsabers casting light against the eternal twilight of Coruscant's sky. Somewhere in the depths below, an old Jedi Master waits with uncomfortable truths and a challenge that could shatter an empire. The Force trembles with the weight of destinies colliding. The Chosen One claimed the throne to prevent darkness from consuming the galaxy. But in the shadows of the lower levels, Obi-Wan Kenobi has come to ask the question that haunts every conversation between Anakin and Padme's whispered arguments in the night. Did Anakin prevent the darkness? Or did he simply give it a more beloved face? The old Jedi Temple Memorial stands forgotten in Coruscant. Sublevel 1313. A shrine maintained by no one and visited by fewer. 20 years of grime coat the stone markers where names have fallen. Jedi were once carved with reverence. Now the letters are barely legible, obscured by rust and neglect. The Empire doesn't officially forbid remembrance of the Jedi Order. Anakin made sure of that, but neither does it encourage it. Better to let the past fade quietly into myth than make martyrs of those who fell up during Order 66. Obi-Wan Kenobi stands before the memorial with his hood drawn, but he makes no attempt to hide his presence in the Force. He blazes like a beacon, deliberately broadcasting his location to anyone with the sensitivity to feel it. His robes are worn and patched, the tan fabric speaking of decades in hiding on some backwater world. His beard has gone fully gray, and new lines carve canyons across his face. But his eyes remain sharp, clear, and infinitely sad. He senses them long before they arrive. Three presences in the Force, brilliant and terrible in their power. The first is achingly familiar, Anakin, his former Padawan, his brother in all but blood. The signature is complex, layered with light and shadow, intertwined so thoroughly that Obi-Wan cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. It's like staring into a binary star system. Two forces locked in eternal orbit, neither able to destroy the other. The other two signatures are younger, rawer, but no less potent. Twins. He'd heard the rumors that Padme survived, that she'd borne Anakin's children, but feeling their power firsthand makes his breath catch. These are not the untrained Force sensitives he'd hoped for, children who might be turned from their father's path. These are warriors forged in the crucible of the Chosen One's obsessive instruction. The sound of boots on Duracrete echoes through the empty sublevel. Anakin emerges first from the shadows, flanked by his children. The Emperor wears robes of deep gray, neither the black of the Sith nor the white of the Jedi, always walking that impossible line. His lightsaber hangs at his belt, unlit but ready. The mechanical hand Obi-Wan remembers from the Clone Wars has been replaced with something more sophisticated, but it still carries the same subtle wrongness in the Force, dead metal where living flesh should be. Luke Skywalker takes his position at his father's right hand. Obi-Wan studies him with a master's eye. Anakin's features softened by Padme's grace, tall and powerful, with that same reckless confidence. Anakin carried as a young Jedi, but there's a hardness there too, a certainty that unsettles Obi-Wan. This young man has never known doubt, never questioned his place in the galaxy. His red lightsaber declares his willingness to embrace methods the old Jedi Order would have forbidden. Leia Skywalker mirrors her brother on Anakin's left. She carries herself like royalty, shoulders back, chin high, every inch her mother's daughter. But her presence in the Force reminds Obi-Wan of Anakin at his most dangerous, that perfect fusion of instinct and intellect, that ability to see 10 moves ahead while living completely in the moment. Her blue lightsaber is the only splash of traditional Jedi color among them, and somehow that makes her more threatening, not less. She wields the symbols of the light while serving an empire built on authoritarian control. "Hello there," Obi-Wan says, and he can't keep the ghost of old warmth from his voice. How many times did he greet Anakin with those exact words during the Clone Wars? Anakin's jaw tightens. Master. The word carries weight, acknowledgement of what they were, recognition of the chasm now between them. Not your master, Obi-Wan corrects gently. Not anymore. You made that choice 20 years ago when you took the throne. I saved the galaxy from Palpatine, Anakin says. And there's the edge of defensiveness Obi-Wan remembers. From 1,000 arguments. During the Clone Wars. I did what the Jedi Council wouldn't do. I ended the Sith. Did you? Obi-Wan asks. Or did you simply claim the Sith's prize for yourself? Luke's hand moves toward his lightsaber, but Anakin raises his human hand in a staying gesture. Let him speak. He came here for a reason. Obi-Wan nods slowly, grateful that Anakin still possesses enough wisdom to hear criticism. I've spent 20 years on Tatooine, watching, waiting. hoping that the reports I heard were exaggerations, that the empire you built was genuinely different from Palpatine's vision. He pauses, lets the weight of his next words settle. It's not. You're wrong, Leia interjects, her voice sharp with controlled anger. My father ended the Sith purge. He established rule of law, protection for sentient rights, representation in the Imperial Senate. A Senate with no real power. Obi-Wan interrupts. Governors appointed by your father, not elected by their people. Worlds that resist occupied by stormtroopers. Dissenters disappeared, their families intimidated into silence. Tell me, Princess, how is this different from what Palpatine would have done? The methods are gentler, perhaps, the rhetoric more palatable, but the result is the same. One family holding absolute power over trillions of beings. We're not tyrants, Luke says, but there's uncertainty, bleeding into his voice. Good. Doubt is the first step toward wisdom. Aren't you? Obi-Wan gestures to the memorial behind him. Your father ordered the deaths of nearly every Jedi in the galaxy. Oh, I know the official story, that Order 66 was Palpatine's command, that Anakin tried to stop it. But the clones didn't all receive stand-down orders, did they, Anakin? You let it continue. You let your brothers and sisters die, because they represented a threat to your new order. They wouldn't have accepted what needed to be done, Anakin says, and his voice carries the weight of 20 years of justification, of arguments with Padme in the dark, of decisions that still haunt him. The Jedi Order was corrupt, blind, arrogant. They would have tried to restore the Republic, and the Republic was a rotting corpse, propped up by bureaucracy and corporate greed. I did what was necessary. Necessary. Obi-Wan tastes the word like ash. Mace Windu was necessary. Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, Shaak Ti. They were your friends, Anakin. They trusted you. They would have opposed me. So you had them killed. Obi-Wan's voice breaks slightly. Do you see, Anakin? Do you hear yourself? This is what the dark side does. It takes your noble intentions, your desire to save Padme, to protect the galaxy, and twists them into justification for atrocity. Anakin's eyes flash yellow for just an instant before fading back to blue, and Obi-Wan's heart sinks. Still so close to the edge, still fighting that internal war. Why are you here, Obi-Wan? Anakin asks, his voice carefully controlled. You didn't reveal yourself after 20 years just to lecture me about choices I can't unmake. I'm here because the galaxy is on the brink of civil war, Obi-Wan says. The Rebel Alliance grows stronger every day. Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, Saw Gerrera. They've united dozens of systems under the banner of freedom. They remember the Republic, flawed as it was. They're willing to fight for the right to choose their own destiny. They're terrorists, Leia says flatly. They bomb civilian targets, assassinate Imperial officers, spread propaganda that destabilizes peaceful systems. We've seen the intelligence reports. One being's terrorist is another's freedom fighter, Obi-Wan replies. The Rebel Alliance exists because your empire, for all its talk of order and justice, denies people the fundamental right to govern themselves. You may be benevolent dictators, but you're still dictators. Anakin steps forward, and Obi-Wan feels the force coil around his former Padawan like a living thing. What would you have me do, Master? Dissolve the Empire? Return power to a Senate that couldn't protect its own citizens? Let the galaxy fracture into 1,000 petty kingdoms fighting over the scraps? I've brought peace. You've brought compliance, Obi-Wan corrects. There's a difference. The tension spikes, 3 lightsabers humming to life simultaneously. Anakin's blade burns blue, steady and controlled. Luke's red saber crackles with barely contained energy. Leia's blue blade mirrors her father's, a declaration of allegiance. They form a triangle around Obi-Wan, not threatening yet, but ready. Obi-Wan doesn't draw his own weapon. I'm not here to fight you, Anakin. I'm here to offer you a choice. The same choice I offered Vader on Mustafar all those years ago. When I learned you still lived, step down. Dismantle the Empire. Work with the Rebel Alliance to establish a true representative government. Show the galaxy that the Chosen One can choose redemption over power. And if I refuse, then I join the rebellion, Obi-Wan says simply. I train the next generation of Jedi to oppose your empire. I become the symbol of resistance you've tried to prevent from emerging. The Jedi Order will rise again, Anakin, and it will stand against tyranny, even yours. The silence stretches taut. Obi-Wan watches calculations flash behind Anakin's eyes, tactical assessments, political ramifications, personal pain at the thought of fighting his former master. The chosen one trained by the Jedi, corrupted by fear, crowned by ambition. What choice will he make? Luke breaks the deadlock, his voice uncertain for the first time. Father, what if he's right? What if we're just maintaining Palpatine's empire with better intentions? Luke, no, Leia says sharply, but her brother continues. We've never questioned this. We've never asked if there might be another way. Mother questions it. I see it in her eyes at every state dinner, every military briefing. What if? Enough. Anakin's command silences his son. But Obi-Wan sees the crack forming. Doubt, the most powerful weapon against certainty. Anakin deactivates his lightsaber, and after a moment, his children follow suit. You want me to give up the throne? To trust the galaxy to govern itself when I've seen how spectacularly it fails at that task? He laughs bitterly. You taught me to trust in the Force. The Force made me its chosen one. It gave me this power for a reason. Walking away from that responsibility would be the greatest act of selfishness imaginable. Or the greatest act of faith, Obi-Wan counters. Faith that other beings are capable of determining their own fate. Faith that the galaxy doesn't need a chosen one to hold it together. Faith that your children might forge their own paths if you gave them the freedom to choose. Anakin's flesh hand clenches into a fist. For a moment, Obi-Wan thinks violence is inevitable. Then the Emperor's shoulders slump almost imperceptibly. A moment of vulnerability quickly masked. I need time. To think. To consult with Padme. You have 1 month, Obi-Wan says. After that, I go public. I reveal myself to the rebellion, and this conflict becomes open war. Jedi against your empire. Master against apprentice, one final time. I pray it doesn't come to that, Anakin. I pray you find the wisdom I failed to teach you all those years ago. Obi-Wan turns to leave, but Leia's voice stops him. You're making a mistake. My father has held this galaxy together for 20 years. Without him, without us, it would descend into chaos and suffering. We're not perfect, but we're necessary. Obi-Wan looks at her with infinite sadness. Necessary evil is still evil, princess. Your father learned that lesson too late. I hope you learn it sooner. He pulls his hood up, preparing to vanish back into the Coruscant underworld. May the Force be with you. All of you. You'll need it in the days ahead. Then he's gone, melting into shadows and crowd noise. His presence in the Force fading to a whisper. Luke and Leia look to their father, waiting for orders, for certainty, for the unshakable confidence that has guided them their entire lives. Instead, they see something they've never witnessed before. Doubt etched across the Emperor's face like cracks in a statue's facade. Father, Leia asks quietly. Anakin Skywalker, Emperor of the known galaxy, chosen one of the Force, stares at the memorial bearing the names of Jedi he helped destroy. When he speaks, his voice is barely audible above the distant hum of Coruscant's traffic. What if he's right? The Imperial Palace thrums with tension in the days following Obi-Wan's reappearance. Anakin withdraws into the meditation chambers he built within the old council room, spending hours staring at the empty seats where Masters Yoda, Mace Windu, and Obi-Wan himself once sat in judgment. Padme knows better than to disturb him during these sessions, but she feels his turmoil. Through their bond, a maelstrom of conflicting emotions that sometimes wakes her in the night with his anguish bleeding into her dreams. Luke and Leia respond to their father's uncertainty in characteristically opposite ways. Luke becomes introspective, questioning every order he gives, second-guessing tactical decisions that once came as naturally as breathing. He spends his free hours in the Imperial archives, reviewing the Senate records from the final days of the Republic, trying to understand what his father saw that convinced him democracy had failed beyond redemption. Leia, by contrast, hardens. She doubles her efforts to crush rebel activity, coordinates raids with ruthless efficiency, and presents her father with daily reports of successful operations. Every captured rebel cell, every intercepted weapons shipment, every planet that reaffirms loyalty to the Empire, she offers these victories like gifts, proof that the Skywalker dynasty serves a vital purpose. On the 7th day after Obi-Wan's ultimatum, Padme finally breaks protocol and enters Anakin's meditation chamber uninvited. She finds him floating cross-legged a meter above the floor, surrounded by a corona of force energy that makes the air shimmer like heat distortion. His eyes are closed, but she knows he senses her presence. "You can't meditate your way out of this decision," she says softly. Anakin descends slowly, his boots touching the polished floor without a sound. When he opens his eyes, they're bloodshot from lack of sleep. "I killed him, Padme. Not Palpatine's way, with hatred and malice. I killed him because he was an obstacle to peace. I convinced myself it was righteous. Necessary." He gestures at the empty council seats. "I killed them all. And for 20 years I've told myself it was the only way. That I saved the galaxy." "You did save us from Palpatine," Padme insists, moving to take his hands in hers. The contrast between warm flesh and cold metal has never stopped unsettling her. But she's learned to see past it. That monster would have ruled through terror and genocide. "You stopped him. That matters." "But I replaced him with myself," Anakin says, and the raw honesty in his voice breaks her heart. "I killed the Jedi, dismantled the Republic, and crowned myself Emperor. I told myself I was different, that I was better, that as long as I had you and the children to anchor me to the light, I could wield absolute power without corruption." He laughs bitterly. "I sound exactly like Palpatine, don't I? Justifying atrocity with noble intentions. You're nothing like him." Padme's voice hardens with certainty. "Palpatine destroyed for the sake of destruction. You built something. The Empire has problems. I've never denied that, but it's not the nightmare Palpatine envisioned. We have courts, laws, protections for non-human species that never existed under the Republic. You've prevented a dozen genocides, stopped 3 civil wars before they could consume entire sectors. That has to count for something, does it?" Anakin pulls away, pacing toward the viewport that overlooks Coruscant's endless cityscape. "Or am I just better at hiding the chains? Obi-Wan said something that's been eating at me. He said I've brought compliance, not peace. What if the only difference between my empire and Palpatine's is that mine smiles while it oppresses?" Before Padme can answer, the chamber doors hiss open. Leia strides in without announcement, her face flushed with excitement and something harder, vindication. "Father, we've intercepted rebel communications. A major operation is planned for Naboo in 3 days. They're targeting the plasma refineries, trying to cripple our energy production for the Mid-Rim. I've already deployed the 3rd Fleet, but I wanted your authorization for—" "No." Leia stops mid-sentence, blinking. "Father, I said no." Anakin turns from the viewport, and Padme sees the decision crystallizing behind his eyes. "Recall the 3rd Fleet. We're not engaging the rebels on Naboo, but they'll destroy critical infrastructure. Millions could lose power, entire systems could. I know what's at stake, Leia." Anakin's voice carries an edge of command that makes even his daughter straighten reflexively. "But I won't turn your mother's homeworld into a battlefield. Not again. Not after what happened during the Clone Wars." Leia's hands clench into fists. "This is about Kenobi, isn't it? He plants a seed of doubt, and you're ready to abandon everything we've built? Father, the Empire needs you to be strong right now. The rebels are testing us, seeing if we'll blink. If we show weakness. Strength isn't measured by how quickly we resort to violence." Padme interjects. "Sometimes the stronger choice is restraint. Mother, with respect, you've never commanded troops in battle. You've never had to make the decisions that keep billions safe. Father taught us that sometimes mercy is just delayed cruelty, that failing to act decisively creates worse suffering down the line." Anakin flinches at his own philosophy quoted back to him. "I taught you that." "You did." Luke enters the chamber, and Padme realizes this was coordinated. The twins have been communicating, planning this intervention. "You taught us that power without the will to use it is worthless, that the galaxy respects strength, and hesitation invites catastrophe." He moves to stand beside his sister, presenting a united front. "We've studied the histories, Father. The fall of the Old Republic, the Mandalorian Wars, the Jedi Civil War. Every time the government showed weakness, it was exploited. Millions died because leaders couldn't make hard choices. And how many millions died because leaders made those hard choices too easily?" Anakin asks quietly. "How many systems burned because someone decided their vision of order justified any cost?" The twins exchange uncertain glances. This version of their father, questioning, vulnerable, is foreign territory. They've been raised on his certainty, his absolute conviction that the Skywalker Empire represents the galaxy's best hope for lasting peace. What are you saying? Leia asks carefully. That Kenobi's right? That we should just give up the Empire? Let the rebellion win? Father, they'll execute us. They'll tear down everything you've built and replace it with the same corrupt republic that failed before. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want anymore, Anakin admits. And the confession seems to physically pain him. 20 years, I've been so certain. So sure that I was the chosen one, that the Force itself mandated my rule. But what if I was wrong? What if I've been using the prophecy as an excuse for tyranny? You're not a tyrant, Luke insists. But there's desperation in his voice now. His father's doubt is shaking the foundations of his entire worldview. Tyrants don't build schools, hospitals, infrastructure. They don't establish protection for the weak or justice for the oppressed. You've given the galaxy stability it never had under the Republic. At the cost of freedom, Padme says softly. She's never been this direct with her children about her concerns, always supporting Anakin publicly while voicing doubts only in private. But Obi-Wan's ultimatum has forced everything into the open. Your father has maintained peace through the implicit threat of overwhelming force. Every planetary governor knows that defiance means imperial occupation. Every senator understands their vote only matters if it aligns with imperial policy. That's not governance. It's benevolent dictatorship at best. You're siding with Kenobi? Leia's voice carries an edge of betrayal. Mother, you've been with father every step of this journey. You helped him build this empire. You can't turn on him now. I'm not turning on anyone, Padme says firmly. I'm acknowledging uncomfortable truths I've been avoiding for too long. I stayed because I love your father, because I believed he could be the emperor the galaxy needed. And in many ways, he has been. But that doesn't mean this system is sustainable, or just, or what the galaxy actually needs long-term. The argument is interrupted by an emergency klaxon. Admiral Pyatt's hologram materializes in the center of the chamber. The officers usually composed face-tight with alarm. My Lord Emperor, we have a developing situation. A rebel strike team has breached the palace perimeter. They're advancing toward the Imperial archives. Security estimates 7 minutes until they reach your position. Anakin's hand moves to his lightsaber instinctively. 20 years of combat reflexes overriding his philosophical crisis. How did they penetrate our defenses? Unknown, my lord. But our sensors indicate one of them is force-sensitive. A powerful one. The Skywalkers exchange knowing glances. Obi-Wan said he would give them 1 month before joining the rebellion. Apparently, some enterprising rebel commander decided to accelerate that timeline. Seal the Imperial wing, Leia commands. Already tactical mode despite the emotional turmoil of moments before. Deploy the guard. Establish a perimeter at. No. Anakin's voice cuts through the chaos like a vibroblade. Let them come. Father, that's insane, Luke protests. If they're here to assassinate you, then let them try. Anakin moves to the center of the chamber, standing where the Council's palatable once projected battle plans. During the Clone Wars, Admiral Pyatt, withdraw all security forces from this wing. I want the rebel team to reach this chamber without obstruction. My lord, I must protest. That's an order, Admiral. Stand down and seal all approaches except the main corridor. I want to see who the rebellion sends to kill an emperor. The hologram flickers out, leaving the Skywalker family alone in the chamber. Padme feels ice settle in her stomach. She knows this mood, this dangerous calm that precedes her husband's most reckless decisions. Anakin, what are you doing? Testing a theory. He ignites his lightsaber, the blue blade casting sharp shadows across his face. If I'm truly a tyrant, if the Empire is genuinely evil, then the rebels are justified in trying to kill me. And if I cut them down defending my throne, then Obi-Wan is right. I'm just another Sith Lord in everything but name. You're putting us all at risk to make a philosophical point? Leia demands, her own saber springing to life. I'm giving the rebellion a chance to show me who they really are. Anakin corrects, and maybe learning who I've become in the process. The chamber doors explode inward in a spray of molten metal and ozone. Four figures burst through the smoke. 3 humans in rebel flight suits, weapons raised, and 1 robed being, whose presence in the Force announces them as the strike team's ace. But it's not Obi-Wan. The Force signature is younger, wilder. touched by trauma and burning with righteous fury. The robed figure throws back their hood, and Anakin's breath catches. The face is Togruta, with white and blue facial markings he hasn't seen in 20 years. Ahsoka Tano, his former Padawan, stands before him with twin white lightsabers ignited, and eyes full of betrayal that time hasn't diminished. "Hello, Master," Ahsoka says, and the word drips with venom. "Did you think I died with the others? Did you hope I had?" Luke and Leia flank their father, forming a defensive triangle, but Anakin raises his hand to stay them. His voice, when he speaks, carries 20 years of grief. "Snips, you survived. No thanks to you." Ahsoka's sabers lower slightly. "No matter how justified. You're trying to manipulate me," Ahsoka says, but her sabers lower another inch. "This is what you do? You twist everything, make people doubt themselves, question their resolve. You did it to the Jedi Council, to the Senate, to everyone who trusted you. I won't fall for it. I'm not manipulating anyone," Anakin says, and Padme hears genuine exhaustion in his voice. "I'm tired, Ahsoka. Tired of fighting, tired of justifying, tired of pretending I'm certain about anything anymore. Obi-Wan came to me a week ago and asked the same question you're asking now. Am I a hero or a monster? I don't know the answer, so I'm giving you the choice. Judge me. Execute me if you believe that's justice, or help me find another way." The silence stretches. One of the rebel soldiers breaks it, his voice tight with fear and confusion. "Commander Tano, we should withdraw. This has gone wrong." "Shut up." Ahsoka's entire focus remains locked on Anakin. "You're serious. You're actually serious. More serious than I've been about anything in 20 years. Anakin takes a step forward, and Ahsoka's sabers snap back to guard position reflexively. "I don't know if I can give up the Empire. I don't know if the galaxy can survive without the Skywalker dynasty holding it together. But I'm willing to find out. I'm willing to try. If you and Obi-Wan will help me." "Help you?" Ahsoka barks a laugh that holds no humor. "After everything you've done, you want redemption? You want us to just forgive you?" "No." Anakin's voice drops to a whisper. "I want you to help me prove that the Chosen One can choose something other than power. That maybe the prophecy was never about bringing balance through domination, but through sacrifice." Padme watches the moment crystallize. Her husband, the Emperor, the Chosen One, stands unarmed before his former student and offers something he's never offered in 20 years of rule: surrender. Ahsoka Tano, rebel commander and last student of Anakin Skywalker, makes a choice that will echo across the galaxy. She deactivates her lightsabers. "You have one chance," she says. "One. Betray this, betray me again, and I will kill you. I swear it on the memory of every Jedi who died because of you." "I know," Anakin says, "and I'll deserve it." Luke and Leia look at each other, then at their mother, lost in a galaxy that suddenly makes no sense. Their father, their emperor, their exemplar of strength and certainty, has just surrendered to a rebel assassin. Everything they believed about power, about duty, about their place in the galaxy, it's all crumbling, like a sand sculpture in a Tatooine windstorm. And somewhere in the depths of Coruscant, Obi-Wan Kenobi senses the shift in the Force and allows himself the first genuine smile in 20 years. The Chosen One has taken his first step toward actual balance. What comes next will test them all. But for the first time since the Clone Wars ended, hope flickers back to life in a galaxy grown accustomed to certainty enforced at lightsaber point. The Imperial Palace's strategic planning chamber becomes an unlikely summit room in the hours following. Ahsoka's failed assassination attempt. Failed, Padme thinks, only in the sense that no one died. In every other way, it succeeded perfectly. Anakin's certainty has been assassinated, his conviction mortally wounded, and the Empire's future hangs suspended in a balance more precarious than any battle. The rebel soldiers who accompanied Ahsoka have been escorted out, not arrested, remarkably, and given safe passage back to their cell. Anakin's order shocked the Imperial Guard, but they obeyed. They always obey. That's part of the problem, Padme realizes. 20 years of absolute obedience has insulated her husband from the kind of resistance that might have tempered his rule earlier. Now the core players sit around the circular table that once hosted war councils during the Clone Wars. Anakin at one end, his face carved from exhaustion and doubt. Ahsoka opposite him, perched on her chair like a predator ready to bolt at the first sign of deception. Luke and Leia flank their father, still processing the paradigm shift. Padme positions herself between the factions, the eternal mediator, though her heart aches with the weight of history repeating itself in new configurations. The final attendee arrives through a private entrance, his presence in the Force preceding him. Obi-Wan Kenobi pulls back his hood and surveys the assembled group with something between satisfaction and sorrow. "I see we've made progress," he says dryly. "Though I had hoped we'd reach this point without assassination attempts." "I'm not apologizing for trying," Ahsoka says flatly. "If Anakin hadn't surrendered, I would have killed him or died trying. The rebellion needs to know the Empire can bleed." "The Empire bleeds every day," Leia counters, her voice tight with controlled frustration. "Rebel attacks kill Imperial citizens, destroy infrastructure, destabilize peaceful systems. You call it liberation. We call it terrorism. The only difference is perspective." "No," Obi-Wan says gently. "The difference is choice. The Empire denies beings the fundamental right to determine their own governance. The rebellion, flawed as its methods may be, fights to restore that choice." Luke leans forward, his elbows on the table in a posture Padme recognizes from Anakin's younger years, eager to understand, desperate to find answers. "But Master Kenobi, the Republic couldn't maintain order. We've studied the records. Corruption was endemic, corporate interests controlled the Senate. Entire populations were enslaved while the government debated procedure. My father ended that. How is chaos and suffering preferable to stable oppression?" "Because beings who choose their own mistakes learn from them," Obi-Wan replies. "Because freedom, even with its failures, is more valuable than security purchased with chains. The Republic failed, yes, but it could have been reformed, improved, evolved into something better. Your father never gave it that chance." "There was no time," Anakin says, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. Palpatine was tightening his grip. The Jedi were about to be purged. Padme was dying. "I saw one path forward: eliminate the Sith, take control, prevent the galaxy from tearing itself apart. Every other option led to catastrophe." "Did it?" Ahsoka asks quietly. "Or did you just tell yourself that because taking power was easier than trusting others?" "You've always had a problem with control, Anakin. Even during the Clone Wars. You bent rules, ignored orders, assumed you knew better than everyone else. The difference is that back then, we could rein you in. Now there's no one to tell the Emperor no." "I tell him no," Padme says, and everyone turns to look at her. "I've spent 20 years arguing against the worst of his impulses, pushing for reforms, protecting what freedoms we could preserve. I'm not blameless in this. I stayed when I should have left, compromised when I should have resisted. But I've never stopped, fighting to make the Empire better than what Palpatine envisioned." "And you've failed," Ahsoka says bluntly. "The Empire is still authoritarian, still oppressive, still maintained through threat of force. Your influence has made it gentler, maybe, more livable, but it's still fundamentally wrong." The words land like physical blows. Padme feels them in her chest, the acknowledgement of 2 decades of futility. She's told herself that incremental progress mattered, that saving individual lives justified remaining complicit in the system. But Ahsoka's assessment cuts through those comfortable lies with the precision of a lightsaber through flesh. Anakin reaches across the table, his flesh hand covering Padme's. "Don't," he says softly. "You're not responsible for my choices. You've been the conscience I tried to ignore, the voice of reason I constantly argued with. If there's any goodness left in the Empire, it's because of you." "That's not enough," Padme whispers. "I see that now. Being a moderating influence on tyranny doesn't make me righteous. It just makes me complicit." Leia stands abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. "So what? We're all monsters now. Everything we've built, every life we've saved, every conflict we've prevented, it's all worthless because we didn't ask permission from a corrupt Senate? Because we prioritized results over procedure?" She glares at Obi-Wan and Ahsoka. "The Jedi Order failed. The Republic failed. You failed. And you have the audacity to judge us for succeeding where you couldn't." "Leia," Luke says quietly, but his sister is beyond restraint now. "No, Luke. I'm tired of this self-flagellation. I'm tired of pretending there's some pure, perfect form of government we could have implemented if only Father had been less ambitious. The galaxy is complex, messy, full of beings who will exploit any weakness for personal gain. We've maintained order. We've prevented another galactic war. Those are achievements, not crimes. Ahsoka's voice cuts through Leia's tirade like ice water. Your father murdered my family. He ordered the execution of thousands of Jedi, people who dedicated their lives to protecting the innocent. You want to talk about achievements? Start by acknowledging the atrocity that built your empire's foundation. The silence that follows is absolute. Leia's face flushes, her mouth opening and closing as she struggles to find a response. Luke stares at his hands, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. Anakin looks like he's been stabbed. I can't unmake that choice, Anakin finally says, his voice barely audible. I can't bring them back. I can justify it, rationalize it, explain the tactical and strategic reasoning until the heat death of the universe. But at the end of the day, I ordered their deaths because they represented a threat to my vision of order. That's the truth Obi-Wan came here to make me face. That's the truth I've been running from for 20 years. He stands, moving to the viewport that overlooks Coruscant's endless sprawl. The question isn't whether I'm a monster. I am. The question is whether a monster can choose redemption and what that redemption looks like. It starts with giving up the throne, Obi-Wan says. And then what? Anakin turns from the window, and Padme sees the anguish naked on his face. The Empire collapses. Civil war erupts. A dozen petty warlords carve up the galaxy and millions die in the power vacuum. I've maintained stability for 2 decades. Removing that stability overnight would be catastrophic. He's not wrong, Luke says quietly, and Ahsoka rounds on him. You're defending tyranny. I'm acknowledging reality. Luke interrupts, and there's steel in his voice now. I'm not my father. I didn't make his choices, didn't order the purge, didn't build the empire from blood and betrayal. But I've lived in the galaxy it created. I've seen the alternative to imperial order, chaos in the Outer Rim, pirate raids, slavery, exploitation. The empire prevents that. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not justly, but it prevents it. By replacing it with sanctioned oppression, Ahsoka counters. You're arguing that imperial slavery is preferable to criminal slavery. That's not a defense. That's admission of guilt. Luke's jaw tightens, but before he can respond, Padme speaks. What if we're asking the wrong question? We're debating whether the empire should exist, whether Anakin's rule is justified. But perhaps the real question is, what comes next? Can we transition from absolute rule to representative government without destroying everything in the process? Obi-Wan strokes his beard thoughtfully. A gradual dissolution of imperial power. Transfer authority back to the Senate over a period of years. Establish constitutional limits on executive power. Restore judicial independence. It could work, theoretically. The rebellion would never accept it. Ahsoka says immediately. You think Saw Gerrera will settle for gradual reform? That Mon Mothma will trust Anakin Skywalker to voluntarily relinquish power? The rebels want revolution, not evolution. Then convince them otherwise, Anakin says, turning from the viewport with renewed focus. You have credibility with the rebellion. So does Obi-Wan. If you tell them I'm genuinely committed to transition, that I'll establish a timeline for restoration of democratic governance. They'll call it a trap, Ahsoka interrupts. And they might be right. How do we know this isn't just another manipulation? That you won't string us along with promises while consolidating power? You don't, Anakin admits. You have to trust me. And I know that's asking the impossible after everything I've done. But I'm offering it anyway, because I don't know what else to do. The chamber falls silent again, the weight of history pressing down on everyone present. Padme watches her. Children process revelations that shatter their understanding of their father, their empire, themselves. She sees Luke's idealism cracking under the weight of uncomfortable truths, sees Leia's certainty, fragmenting as she's forced to acknowledge the moral complexity of their position. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka exchange glances, a silent conversation passing between master and former Grand Padawan. Finally, Ahsoka speaks. I want concrete steps, not promises, not vague commitments to eventual reform. Specific actions we can verify. Anakin nods slowly. Name them. First, release all political prisoners currently held in Imperial detention. Anyone arrested for speaking against the Empire. For peaceful protest, for dissent. They go free immediately. Leia opens her mouth to object, but Anakin raises a hand. Agreed. What else? Second, restore freedom of the press. No more imperial censorship of news networks. No more propaganda controls. The galaxy deserves to know the truth about how it's governed. That will destabilize. Luke begins, but Anakin cuts him off. Agreed. Next, Ahsoka leans forward, her montrals tilting in a way that reminds Padme achingly of the young Padawan she once knew. Third, establish a constitutional convention. Representatives from every sector, elected by their people, tasked with drafting a framework for governance that includes checks on executive power. You participate, you offer input, but you don't control the outcome. And whatever document they produce, you implement it. No vetoes, no amendments, no imperial override. This time Anakin hesitates. Padme can feel him wrestling with the implications, surrendering control of his empire's future to beings who might well decide he should be tried for war crimes. It's a leap of faith that goes against every instinct that's kept him alive and in power for 2 decades. How long? He finally asks. For the convention? 6 months to draft, another 6 for ratification and implementation. 1 year from now, the empire as it currently exists ceases to be. Whatever government emerges from the convention takes its place. And if that government decides I should be executed for the Jedi Purge, if they demand Luke and Leia stand trial as accomplices, then you face that judgment, Obi-Wan says quietly. True redemption requires accepting consequences, Anakin. You can't atone for your crimes while still holding the power to prevent accountability. Anakin's mechanical hand clenches and unclenches, the servo motors whining softly. Padme knows that tell. He's calculating odds, running scenarios, trying to find a path forward that doesn't end with his family destroyed. But there isn't one. There's only faith that doing the right thing will somehow be enough. Father, you can't seriously be considering this, Leia says urgently. They're asking you to commit suicide, to hand over the Empire to people who hate us, who will absolutely demand our execution once they have the power to do so. This is insane. It's justice, Anakin replies, and his voice carries an unexpected peace. For 20 years I've avoided accountability by hiding behind absolute power. Maybe it's time to face what I've done. What we've done. We haven't done anything, Luke protests. We were born into this. We didn't choose to be the Emperor's children. But you've chosen to enforce his rule, Ahsoka says, not unkindly. You've led Imperial forces, commanded troops, made decisions that cost lives. You're not innocent bystanders. Prince Luke, you're active participants in maintaining the system. That makes you accountable. Luke looks to his mother, desperate for support, for someone to tell him that everything he's believed about himself isn't fundamentally wrong. Padme meets her son's eyes and offers only honesty. She's right. We've all made choices that seemed necessary at the time, that we justified with good intentions. But impact matters more than intent. The question is whether we're willing to face the consequences of our actions. I am, Anakin says firmly. I accept all 3 conditions. Release the political prisoners, restore press freedom, establish the Constitutional Convention. 1 year from today, the Skywalker Empire ends. Whatever comes after, we'll face it together as a family. Leia makes a sound between a laugh and a sob. You're going to get us all killed. Maybe, Anakin acknowledges. But at least we'll die having done the right thing. That has to count for something. Obi-Wan stands, extending his hand across the table. Then we have an accord. The rebellion will honor a ceasefire during the transition period. No attacks on Imperial targets, no sabotage operations. In exchange, the Empire ceases all operations against rebel cells and enters good faith negotiations for the convention. Anakin clasps his former master's hand, and Padme feels tears threatening. This simple gesture, trust, offered and accepted between 2 beings who've been enemies for decades, might be the most revolutionary act her husband has ever committed. There's one more thing, Ahsoka says. The Jedi archives. Everything Palpatine seized, everything you've kept locked away in Imperial vaults. It gets returned. Knowledge about the Force shouldn't be monopolized by the Skywalker family. Anakin glances at his children, at the holocrons and texts that have educated them in ways no Jedi or Sith before them were permitted to learn. Giving that up means surrendering the advantage that makes them uniquely powerful. It means trusting that they're strong enough to face whatever comes without the accumulated wisdom of millennia to guide them. Agreed, he says. The archives will be opened to everyone. Let the next generation decide what they want to learn from the past. The meeting dissolves into logistics, drafting the ceasefire terms, identifying representatives for the convention, coordinating the prisoner releases. But Padme sees the underlying shift. Her husband has finally stopped running from the truth about himself, stopped hiding behind power and justification. Whether this path leads to redemption or destruction, at least it's honest. As the others file out, planning to reconvene with rebel leadership and begin the impossible task of unwinding an empire, Luke lingers. His father notices, pauses at the doorway. I don't understand, Luke says quietly. 20 years you've taught us that the empire was necessary, that our family's rule was the only thing preventing galactic chaos. Was it all a lie? No, Anakin says, and his voice carries infinite weariness. I believed every word. That's what makes it so dangerous. True evil doesn't announce itself with cackling laughter and dramatic declarations. It justifies itself with noble intentions and convinces itself that atrocity is necessary. I built the empire to protect people, Luke, and in doing so, I became the thing they needed protection from. What am I supposed to do now? Luke asks, and he sounds impossibly young despite his 23 years. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about our family, about my purpose, it's all wrong. Who am I if not the Emperor's son, the heir to the Skywalker dynasty? Anakin moves back to his son, places both hands, flesh and metal, on Luke's shoulders. You're whoever you choose to be. That's the gift Obi-Wan gave me today, though it felt like a curse at the time. You don't have to be defined by my mistakes. You can forge your own path, make your own choices, become your own person. And whatever you decide, I'll be proud of you. Luke embraces his father, and Padme watches from the doorway as the Emperor and his heir cling to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. Everything they built is about to come crashing down. But perhaps from the ruins, something better can grow. 1 year. 1 year to transform an empire into a republic. To convince a galaxy that the chosen one can choose accountability over power. To prove that even those who've committed atrocities can still choose redemption. It starts with a single step. And for the first time in 20 years, Anakin Skywalker is walking toward the light instead of away from it. The year that follows transforms the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. The first 3 months are chaos barely contained. News of the Emperor's agreement with the rebellion spreads like wildfire through HoloNet channels no longer censored by Imperial control. The initial reaction is disbelief. Conspiracy theories proliferate. That this is an elaborate trap. That Anakin Skywalker is luring the rebellion into complacency before crushing them. But as political prisoners begin streaming from Imperial detention centers, as journalists start publishing exposés about Imperial overreach without facing arrest, as election notices go out for Constitutional Convention delegates, the galaxy begins to believe the impossible. The Empire is actually dismantling itself. Not everyone celebrates. Imperial loyalists, officers who've built careers on absolute authority, governors who've enjoyed unchecked power over their sectors, corporations that thrived under preferential Imperial contracts, resist the transition with increasing desperation. 3 attempted coups erupt in the first 2 months alone. Each time, it's Luke who responds, leading forces loyal to his father's vision of controlled dissolution. But the violence weighs on him. Every Imperial officer he's forced to arrest, every system he must occupy to prevent warlordism, every choice between stability and freedom, they accumulate like scars. Leia takes a different approach. She travels to rebel strongholds throughout the Outer Rim, meeting with resistance leaders who still view the Skywalker family with suspicion bordering on hatred. She endures their accusations, their demands for immediate justice, their insistence that transitional trials begin before the Constitutional Convention concludes. She absorbs their rage and responds not with the forced persuasion she's relied on all her life, but with honest acknowledgement of the Empire's crimes. It's brutally humbling work. More than once, she returns to Coruscant hollow-eyed and shaken, confronting realities that her privileged upbringing never forced her to witness. Padme works tirelessly alongside the convention delegates, offering her experience from the Senate years while carefully avoiding any appearance of controlling the proceedings. She watches beings from 1,000 worlds debate constitutional frameworks, argue over checks and balances, wrestle with how to prevent another, Palpatine or Skywalker, from seizing absolute power. The process is messy, frustrating, and more beautiful than anything she's witnessed in decades. Democracy, she remembers, was never meant to be efficient. It was meant to be representative. Anakin does the hardest thing he's ever done. He lets go. Day by day, decree by decree, he transfers authority away from the imperial throne. Judicial independence is restored. Planetary governors face actual elections. The Senate regains legislative power. Military command structures are restructured to require civilian oversight. Each act of surrender feels like tearing out a piece of himself. But Obi-Wan and Ahsoka remain constant presences, anchoring him through the Force when doubt threatens to overwhelm his resolve. The Jedi archives become a focal point of unexpected controversy. Opening the vaults reveals not just ancient wisdom, but records of the Purge, detailed accounts of how each Jedi died, orders signed by Anakin himself, evidence of atrocities the galaxy had known about intellectually, but now confronts viscerally. Calls for immediate justice intensify. Street protests outside the Imperial Palace demand the Skywalker families stand trial before the transition completes. Some demonstrators burn effigies. Others simply weep. Ahsoka spends months in the archives, retrieving holocrons and texts she thought lost forever. She discovers records of her own presumed death. Anakin had classified her as killed on Mandalore, never updating the file when he learned she survived. The casual erasure of her existence wounds her in ways the assassination attempt didn't. But she channels that pain into constructive action, working with Luke to establish a new approach to Force training, one that rejects both the Jedi's detachment and the Sith's corruption, seeking instead the balance the chosen one was always meant to embody but never achieved alone. Luke throws himself into this work with desperate intensity. Training with Ahsoka provides purpose beyond enforcing his father's dissolution of power. She's merciless in her instruction, pushing him to question every assumption, to recognize how his upbringing has warped his understanding of the Force. The red kyber crystal in his lightsaber becomes a source of particular focus. "You bled this crystal," Ahsoka says during one brutal session. 6 months into the transition, they're alone in the archive's meditation chamber, surrounded by holocrons that pulse with ancient wisdom. "You poured your pain and anger into it until it turned from its natural state. That's a Sith technique. Luke, your father taught you darkness and called it balance." "He taught me control," Luke protests, but his conviction wavers. 6 months of watching the Empire crumble, of seeing the damage his family's rule has caused, has shaken his certainty to its foundations. "He taught me to acknowledge darkness without being consumed by it." Did he? Ahsoka gestures to his lightsaber. Or did he teach you to embrace darkness while pretending you weren't? There's a reason Jedi never bled their crystals. Luke, it's not about denying darkness exists. It's about refusing to let darkness define you. Luke stares at the weapon he's carried since his 15th birthday. The blade that's always set him apart from his sister. That's always marked him as his father's son in ways that go beyond genetics. "What would you have me do? Purify it? I don't even know if that's possible." "It is," Ahsoka says quietly. "I've done it. My white blades started as red sabers I took from fallen inquisitors. I poured my pain into them, grief for the order that fell, rage at Anakin's betrayal, years of suffering, and the darkness was washed away. Not destroyed, transformed. The crystals remember their corruption, but they're no longer defined by it." How? By choosing healing over vengeance. By forgiving what seems unforgivable. By accepting that redemption is possible, even for those who've touched the dark side. She meets his eyes. "Your father is trying to redeem himself. Maybe it's time you tried too." The work takes weeks. Luke meditates with his lightsaber disassembled, the red crystal pulsing between his hands, and confronts every choice he's made in service to the Empire. Every rebel he killed believing they were terrorists. Every system he occupied thinking he brought order. Every time he used Force persuasion to bypass consent. thinking his judgment superior. The crystal shows him the truth about himself, not a hero maintaining peace, but a privileged enforcer of oppression, however benevolent. The day the crystal turns white, bleeding out its crimson corruption into pure light, Luke weeps for the first time since childhood. Ahsoka finds him collapsed in the meditation chamber, the purified crystal glowing softly in his palm, and simply holds him while he grieves for the person he thought he was. Leia's journey is different, but equally transformative. In month 7 of the transition, she's on Ryloth negotiating with Twi'lek, resistance leaders, when a young woman approaches. Her, barely 20, with scars from slave collars still visible on her leku. The woman says nothing, just stares at Leia with eyes full of questions. Finally, she speaks. "You're Princess Skywalker." The Emperor's voice. The necessary thing. The Constitutional Convention itself becomes the galaxy's central drama. HoloNet channels broadcast the proceedings live, every argument, every compromise, every impassioned speech about what kind of galaxy should emerge from the Empire's ashes. Beings who've never cared about politics become obsessed with the minutiae of constitutional law. The entire galaxy watches democracy being rebuilt in real time. Not everyone wants democracy. In month 10, a coalition of Imperial warlords, officers who rejected Anakin's transition, stage a coordinated uprising across 15 sectors. They claim legitimacy as the true inheritors of Palpatine's vision, dismiss the Skywalker family as weak and corrupted by Jedi sentiment. Their forces are substantial, their fleets well-equipped, and their timing calculated to sabotage the convention before it can complete its work. The response comes not from the remnant empire, but from the forming republic. Rebel fleets and Imperial forces still loyal to Anakin's transition fight side by side for the first time. Luke and Ahsoka lead combined task forces, their coordination in battle speaking to months of training together. Leia coordinates diplomatic isolation of the warlord coalition, convincing neutral systems to deny them safe harbor. Padme works frantically to keep the Constitutional Convention functioning, despite the military crisis, preventing fear from derailing the democratic process. Anakin does something unprecedented. He stays on Coruscant. Obi-Wan suggested it. And though every instinct screams at him to lead his forces personally, he recognizes the symbolism. The Emperor remaining on the throne, while others fight his battles would reinforce the very power, structure their dismantling. The chosen one trusting others to defend the transition demonstrates genuine change. It's agonizing. He monitors battle reports, feels his children in danger across the galaxy through the Force, and can do nothing but meditate and trust. Trust that Luke's training is sufficient. Trust that Leia's tactical brilliance will prevail. Trust that Ahsoka will protect them both. Trust that the galaxy can save itself without him. The Battle of Fondor becomes the crucible, the warlord coalition masses its entire fleet for a decisive strike at the system, hosting the Constitutional Convention. If Fonder falls, delegates scatter. The transition collapses, and civil war consumes the galaxy. 300 Republic ships, roughly half former Imperial, half Rebel, face down nearly 500 warlord vessels in a desperate defensive action. Luke commands the defense from the bridge of a Republic Star Destroyer, coordinating fleet movements with a precision that would make any admiral envious. But this isn't just tactical genius. This is the Force flowing through him, connecting him to every ship captain, every pilot, every gunner in the fleet. He's learned from Ahsoka to use the Force not for control, but for harmony. He doesn't command. He conducts. Leia is planetside on Fonder, evacuating convention delegates to secure locations while coordinating planetary defense. When warlord forces breach the orbital shield, she makes a choice that will define her legacy. Instead of fleeing to safety, she joins the militia forces defending the convention center. She's a princess, the Emperor's daughter, trained in statecraft and force sensitivity. She has no business in a ground firefight. She fights anyway. Her white lightsaber, she followed Luke's example and purified her own blade months ago, a beacon of hope for defenders who suddenly realize the Skywalker family is truly on their side. The battle rages for 6 hours. Ships burn. Beings die. The galaxy holds its breath. Victory comes not through overwhelming force, but through defection. As the warlord fleet prepares its final assault, 3 Star Destroyers break formation and turn on their commanders, officers loyal to the idea of transition, who've spent months wrestling with weather. The Empire's and justifies, supporting its founders, make their choice. The defection cascades. 1 fleet becomes 2, then 4, then 8 ships changing sides. The warlord coalition collapses from within, betrayed by the same authoritarian structure that made it powerful. When the hierarchy fractures, everything crumbles. Luke broadcasts a single message to all ships. The Empire is dead. Anyone still fighting for it is fighting for a ghost. Join us in building something better, or flee and be forgotten. The choice is yours. 70% of the remaining warlord forces surrender. The rest jump to hyperspace, scattering to unknown regions and outer rim territories where they'll doubtless cause future problems. But the immediate threat is over. The transition survives. On Coruscant, Anakin feels it through the Force, the moment the battle turns. The collective exhale of millions of beings realizing they're going to live. He collapses in the empty throne room, tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude, and the terrible recognition that this is what letting go feels like. His children save the galaxy, not by enforcing his will, but by embodying principles he taught them and then transcended. The Constitutional Convention completes its work 3 weeks later. The document they produce, the Galactic Alliance Charter, is imperfect, filled with compromises and loopholes and provisions that satisfy no one completely. It's democratic and messy and beautiful in its humanity. It establishes a Senate with actual power, an independent judiciary, protections for individual rights, limits on executive authority, and mechanisms for peaceful transfer of power. It also includes a clause specifically forbidding any member of the Skywalker family from holding elected office for 2 generations. Anakin reads the final draft alone in what was once the Emperor's private office. Who better to teach the next generation than those who've lived it? A Jedi order founded by convicted war criminals, Leia says dryly. That's one way to ensure humility. They laugh, and the sound is startling in its normalcy. They're not an emperor and his heirs anymore. Not the voice and the commander. Just people, flawed and damaged and trying to do better. It's terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I'm proud of you, Anakin says suddenly, looking at his children. Both of you. You grew beyond what I taught you, became better than I ever was. That's all a parent can hope for. Luke's voice is soft. You taught us that, too. Eventually, the night stretches on, filled with conversation and confession and careful hope. Outside, Coruscant celebrates the end of one era and the uncertain beginning of another. Inside this small apartment, the Chosen One and his family face the consequences of their choices with something approaching peace. 3 months later, the trials begin. The proceedings are public, broadcast across the galaxy. Anakin Skywalker stands before a tribunal of Republic, judges and admits to ordering the Jedi Purge, to seizing absolute power, to maintaining authoritarian rule. He offers no excuses, no justifications, only acknowledgement of the harm he caused. Luke and Leia testify to their roles in enforcing the Empire, accepting responsibility for their actions. Padme speaks of her complicity, her silence, her failure to leave when she knew the Empire was wrong. The galaxy watches a family accept accountability without flinching. The sentences are severe but not vindictive. 20 years imprisonment for Anakin, 1 year for each year of Imperial rule, 10 years for Luke and Leia, with provisions for education and potential parole, 5 years for Padme, recognition of her moderating influence. They'll serve their time together on a secure facility designed not for punishment, but for restorative justice and continued service to the Republic they helped birth. As guards escort the Skywalker family from the courtroom, Obi-Wan watches from the gallery. Through the Force, he sends his former Padawan one final message. "Well done, Anakin. You've finally brought balance." Anakin smiles, and for the first time in decades, the smile reaches his eyes. The Galactic Alliance survives its turbulent first years. Democracy proves messy, frustrating, and infinitely more just than benevolent dictatorship. The Skywalker family serves their sentences with dignity, using their imprisonment to teach Force-sensitive inmates, counsel troubled youth, and work toward reconciliation with those harmed by the Empire. Luke and Leia are eventually paroled after 7 years, their genuine transformation recognized by the Republic they once opposed. They help Obi-Wan and Ahsoka establish the new Jedi Order, one built on balance, connection, and the understanding that darkness acknowledged is darkness controlled. Anakin serves his full 20 years. He's released in his late 60s, aged and weary but finally at peace. Padme is there to meet him, as she promised she would be. Together, they retire to Naboo, where they spend their remaining years gardening, writing memoirs that spare no details of their crimes, and answering questions from students who want to understand how good people do terrible things, and how terrible people can still choose redemption. The legend of the Skywalker Empire becomes a cautionary tale told to each new generation of the Republic. Power without accountability, even in noble hands, leads inevitably to tyranny. But it's also a story of hope, proof that no one is beyond redemption if they're willing to face the consequences of their actions and genuinely change. Luke Skywalker becomes the first Grand Master of the Reformed Jedi Order, teaching students to embrace their full humanity rather than deny their emotions. His white lightsaber becomes a symbol of transformation, of darkness purified into light. Leia Skywalker enters politics despite the Charter's prohibition on her holding office, working as an advisor and activist for representative government. She spends decades fighting for the very systems her family once oppressed, her guilt transmuted into tireless service. The galaxy remembers Anakin Skywalker not as the chosen one who saved them, but as the man who learned that saving the galaxy meant letting it save itself. His story is complex, uncomfortable, and ultimately human, a reminder that heroes and monsters are sometimes the same people at different points in their journey, and somewhere in the Force, balanced at last. The echoes of 1,000 Jedi no longer scream in anguish, but whisper in approval. The Chosen One finally fulfilled his destiny, not by wielding power, but by surrendering it.